I learned a lot about communication in this class thus far, way more than I anticipated. I learned a lot about like why we communicate as far as making meanings and identities for ourselves and attributing meanings to things. I never really thought about why exactly I communicated with people other than I wanted to do the physical need of communication as the book covers. I also learned a lot about communication models and the effects of communication and how like communication is like irreversible, which kind of made me think about impressions, which ended up being in chapter 4. And the impressions were like snap judgments and how we hold on to first impressions and things, because I feel I hold on to first impressions heavily, and I feel like it, either puts a halo or horns effect, which I need to learn to let go of. I also learned a lot about cultural context in communication, like high versus low, and how many cultures actually fall into both categories. I never really thought about it before. And, the uses of like nonverbal communications in a lot of other countries, whereas like I feel I use verbal communication way more. I feel like it's hard to read people sometimes. You may think that they are doing or mean one thing, and they completely mean something else. Another thing I learned a lot about was like communication competence and open-mindedness versus ethnocentricity. Because I feel I really try to be open-minded, and it's hard when we're making judgments to stay open-minded. But I really want to try and be open-minded, especially pursuing into my professional career, and through the activities such as like the resume activity, where we made judgments based off of what the resumes looked like. It really shed light on how recruiters and human resource departments look at me when I'm applying to jobs, and how I'm coming off to them. I also learned a lot about self-concept versus self-esteem, which I only really thought about self-esteem prior to reading about both of them. And I learned that my self-concept needs to be more flexible. My perceived self versus my presenting self. I feel I'm really critical to my perceived self, and I feel I try really hard to make my presenting self, or the way I want to appear to others, really good and happy and pleasant and a polite person. Even if I'm having a bad day, I feel I work really hard to make my presenting self a lot better than my perceived self. I also learned a lot about self-disclosure and how self-disclosure helps build trust between people, but also the conditions that make an honest self-disclosure. And I didn't really think that silence would be an alternative to self-disclosure, but I guess it could be. I guess I've faced that a couple times with friends who I feel would have shared things with me, but ended up staying quieter about their lives or feelings they're having. I also learned a lot about the Johari window, which I hope I'm saying correctly. I thought I was a lot more known to myself and known to others, so I felt I was in the open section, where I actually fell into the not known to myself, so in like the hidden section, which is also interesting because I feel I'm learning a lot about myself every day. I also learned a lot about perception and reality, and that's where I thought about professionally, like how I perceive things and what the reality actually is, where the person's not actually mad at me, they're just busy. So it was very interesting, very eye-opening to hear all this stuff about communication, especially going into the professional field for me, where I'm applying to, my big girl job and stuff like that. I need to remember a lot of these communication tools and habits that I learned, because not everything that's on its that's on someone's face or on the face of meanings is what it actually means. I found we really need to look into like the context of things and perceive things and for what they actually are, and find truth and self-disclosure, and what influences our perception, and making sure we're making correct judgments and wise judgments, and making sure that I'm going in the right path with my communication, as far as my professional field goes, and personally. I'm still growing personally, but I feel no one will ever stop growing personally in the communication field. So yeah, I feel I learned a lot actually in these past 4 chapters of our book. So that's very interesting.